So let's create let's create different match modes for this. So let's go under managers, and actually we're going to create an entire framework for that. Well, sort of an entire framework. Let's call that matches. Let's create a new C# script which we will call match rules. Let's open the script. Now it's basically going to be based off a few callbacks. So what happens when a player dies, apart from adding the score to the player that wins, and so on. So let's make this an abstract class, and this will be our match rules. So we need to have an abstract void player died. Let's pass. I think for the most part we could just use the same calls we use for this. So for example, we get the RPC that the player is dead, and for up till here it's the same thing, but this could not, this doesn't need to be part of this one in here. So handle end of round, I'm going to move this and paste it in here. So this will be the end of the end of the round. Then let's see, and then okay, handle. So basically this will be your player is dead, what we do on the base. Then this will be based off the match itself. So player died, we still need to know the player that died. And let's create a new instance of match rules. Okay. Then how will that look? Let's do match rules, and we also need to be passing a match manager, of course, although we could probably just use a singleton for that. Match manager, let's call it match manager. Then let's create a new class that will allow us to say have the duel. Let's call this duel match. Delete this. Let's add the namespace. And implement the abstract class. Okay, so when a player has died, we're pretty much going to do handle end of round. So let's see, where is this? Handle end of round. Yeah, so we're going to make this into a public void. So the RPC, as you can see here, this sends the RPC that a player is dead. The handle end of round should be removed from here entirely because this is sent locally. So when you send the RPC, in this case, we should be looking if this player is the master, then you will do match manager or match rules dot player died. Pass the player ID and pass the this as the match manager, okay. So that will be match manager dot handle end of round. So essentially we're doing the same thing, but now we have a lot more control because we can simply instantiate new match rules based on what we want. So let's showcase that. Let's see if this works first of all. So on instance, we're going to be getting the type of match this is. So let's create a new dual match. Okay, that's all we need. We can set up a rule, or we can set up an integer, or even whatever we want with this, and it will create rules for based on that match. Okay, so let's hit play. Minimize first of all, and hit play. And we should be getting the exact same thing right now. So we should be getting we get this. Perfect. So let's say we want to create a deathmatch instead of this. So let's create deathmatch, not team deathmatch, just deathmatch. So let's add the same stuff. This needs to be now deriving from match rules, and then we need to implement the abstract class. Let's put this back here. Let's put this back here as well. So deathmatch. The deathmatch now we can create new rules on our match manager. For example, we have a send spawn position where it will send spawn positions for each player. So here's what we can say. Client begin round. We can, well, first of all, we can make this into a public void, but let's do public void assign random spawn position to a player. Then we will say public void assign spawn random position, or RPC client assign spawn position, string player ID, then vector3 position and vector3 rotation. Assign spawn position, that's per player. We actually already have this call. Oops. So send spawn positions, as you can see on our network print, we have that. Send spawn position, we get. So basically, just do spawn positions dot length, then transform the spawn, that will be level manager, spawn positions random, and this needs to be random dot range between 0 and the length you have to this. Then we're going to assign that as a spawn position to the player ID, and s.position, s.rotation. That assigns it s.Euler angles, that assigns it, but it doesn't actually spawns the player. It won't spawn them there. So let's see, send spawn position. Well, the first call we can do on our deathmatch will be assign random spawn position to player ID. Then we can invoke, I think we can do an invoke spawn player. Let's try say invoke. Yeah, we can invoke because we need to basically do this from a game object. Spawn player in 3 seconds. Spawn player, and let's save the match manager, the reference to the match manager. Then in here we will have a call that a specific player needs to create a controller. So RPC create controller. Let's see, the thing is we are also passing the weapon ID. So let's split this up. I'd say let's do public void create controller actual. So we will take this out of the equation, and to create a controller we need to be passing a network print. The game object is coming from, yeah, okay, it's coming from here, so let's just do the same thing. Index is, it's on the game UI. Then cut this from here and paste it in here. So load player network print create controllers actual print, and we can pass the weapon ID, and we can pass is pretty much, of course, and that will be weapon ID and pretty much. Okay, so we're doing the same thing, and this needs to be inside here, I guess. But let's now force a public void create controller for player, where you will actually have the player ID. And then we will be using public void RPC client create controller for player, and we have the string player ID. Now this first path is basically used for, it's basically used for the calls we're doing, and because this will change to RPC later when we add the network libraries, so this is just passing through. So for that we need to find the player. Let's see, do we have, yeah, let's do network print player get player ID. Since we have the player, then all we need to do is create controller actual player. We need to be passing the weapon ID, so it's a good case that we can just store the weapon ID as well. Weapon ID, and it's pretty much, of course, it's not. So when we're using the first RPC create controllers, where we're using the weapon ID, where we create the controllers for everyone, we will say player.weaponID equals weapon ID. Now, technically, this is still based off the rules of the game, the rules of the match, because we have a random selection of weapons over here. So this will be a for example, we should have another abstract class, an abstract method, or just a virtual method, I guess. Virtual void pre-match setup. Let's pass the match manager. So this will be doing something. In the case of the dual match, we will override that. And we're going to cut this. Let's see, we have a random animation, okay. Weapons run, let's create controllers. Well, actually, we should be sending the create calls, the create controllers through the pre-match, through the match rules. So RPC client assign spawn position. Let's do RPC client. Let's split this and we will say public void send create controllers. Let's get all that. Now, is pre-match. Where was that? Oh, we do this over here. Well, let's think. So basically we can just force this, to be honest. We could just use create controllers weapon random. I think this needs just to be split away from the weapon ID. So we will be doing public void RPC client force weapon ID string weapon ID. Then it will be going for each player dot weapon ID. It will have the new weapon ID. So this will be removed. Then the weapon ID that you're going to be using is going to be taken from the network print. Okay, so that will be player.weapon ID. Okay, let's remove it from here as well. Okay, let's delete that. Then we will do public void send force weapon ID string weapon ID. Again, it's the same issue. It's the same thing. Where we add the network libraries, this will turn, it will look something like this. Okay, so that's why we're adding this here, because we can't call that call from this one. So send force weapon should be done over here, where we will say weapons is pre-match first of all. So copy that inside the dual match, do this, then do match manager dot force send force weapons random. Okay, then let's add the match manager. So before you actually send the create controllers, match rules, pre-match setup. What's happening there? Pre-match setup, we need to be passing this, yeah. Create controllers then is pre-match. So I think with this we should get again the same behavior, the exact same behavior. We should get the match manager to assign a random weapon. How we're going to test that when we only have 2 weapons? That's another thing altogether. So let's create a new weapon as well. I'm just going to assign this one. And we'll play the game a little bit and we'll see. Of course the animation is going to be way off. So let's see, will we get the new weapon? We don't. I actually think we should be, maybe we should be doing that. Yeah, the replay is going to be a little bit annoying testing this. And now we actually get the result, we get the replay to play infinite from what I can see, because it was keep streaming. So we found another, no, okay, now it plays fine. Okay, so one thing I think for the match rules, the start match, okay, that happens again, start match. Oh yeah, we forgot to assign the, damn it, we forgot to assign this. So I'm going to make this red one and I'm going to say like 5 times you can use that ID. So technically we should have a lot more chances seeing the new weapon. Yeah, and that's the new weapon. You can see that it's just not placed correctly. If we go to the other player, we will see it. Okay, and let's keep shooting. Then after the replay, we should get the a new weapon, or we should get a different weapon. Technically, we could do this, and it will force to only use one ID. And yeah, as you can see, we now control from the match rules which weapons are getting enabled. So what that means, on our deathmatch, we could basically say public virtual void, public override, actually, pre-match setup. We can do nothing here. We can just say it's the pre-match, so whatever. Then on the spawn player, match manager, let's say force RPC send player join, picks up an item. Let's find the correct call for that. Let's collapse. So send player join, create controller for player. We need this, so that should say send create controller for player from our deathmatch. Create controller for player. We need to store the player ID as well. One problem, however, is that this one could be overwritten by this. So we shouldn't do just an invoke. We should do, let's try and make an enumerator for that. Spawn player with string player ID and match manager mm. So let's delete that. Because if at the 3 seconds that passed somebody died, it will override the previous value. So we will do yield return new wait for seconds, let's say 3. So we should try and do start coroutine spawn player ID and match manager past that. Okay, so after this happens, send create controller for player ID. For pretty much setup we have nothing, but we should allow the players to basically have their own network, their own, let's see, we need to have assigned the weapon ID. The weapon ID will basically be if you have unlocked something, if you selected a loadout, something like that in the beginning. So for right now, since we only have one, I'm just going to hard code it to red, which is the first weapon we're using. Okay, then let's go on our match manager on instance and change the match rules. And let's call that, let's make it a new deathmatch. So let's go and kill the other guy and see what's going to happen. The stuff on the side will play a little bit more role. We need to be seeing what's going to be spawned and what's not. So let's open that. Let's go and kill him. Well, let's try and kill him. Okay, there he goes. He's dead. And as you can see, after 3 seconds, he spawned again. Technically, he should spawn on the other position as well at some point. Let's keep killing him. Yeah, there it is. He now spawned to the back position. So it's right now just picked at random. You should be, checking how close an enemy is and stuff like that. But you can see that we basically created a new match rule with changing 2 things. So let's say if you wanted to have a battle royale, for example, what you will do a force disconnect player. So let's do player joined. That's player joined, create controller for player, RPC, RPC client player Z is dead, public void, send force disconnect player, or force debrief scene, I guess, for player. Of course, we can't really check that because we can't kill ourselves. So basically what that's going to be doing, we will do something like force client, RPC client, force debrief scene, or you can call it battle royale death. For player ID. Okay, so if this is the master, he should also be checking how many players are left after we have removed it. So we will do in this case something like network print get player ID if player dot is local to do disconnect, go to debrief scene, then remove player from list. Actually, this needs to happen here. Remove player from list. And if it's master, check if player count is at 0 or 1. So basically check if player is at 0 or 1. If only one player, then go to win match. Now on our pre-rules, now that I think about it, on our start match, both the enable pickable items, both the send spawn positions should be done via the match rules. So let's remove that. And enable pickable items, yeah, I think that should be done through match rules as well. So let's do a public void send enable pickable items, which is just going to be a pass-through operation. Okay, so delete that. Maybe even create controllers can be that, to be honest. Anyway, so match rules. For the duel match, we forcing the weapons, we send enable pickable items, since this is the duel, and we send or we say assign send spawn positions. Let's rename that to send spawn positions all, or assign spawn positions all. Better name. Okay, that's for the pre-match. Then right now for the deathmatch, it's still going to be the same thing for this as well. So I think it will make a little bit more sense if we make this an abstract void as well. Pre-match setup. Okay, deathmatch, match manager. Okay, let's test this out. Perfect. Let's test this then. We are still on deathmatch. We probably should show somewhere that we are on deathmatch. Perfect. And you can see he spawns back there. Obviously, you need a better level for deathmatch. Let's see, did he spawn? This guy is not spawning his weapon for some reason. Let's see. Let's open up this. Right. Yeah, he's not spawning his weapon. That's weird. Let's take a look here. Weapon ID is red and red. Okay, so let's maybe check why that happened. But I'm fairly sure we saw the previous weapon. We had it, so maybe we missed something. So let's do RPC create controllers, create controller actual. In here you have your init player weapon ID, Oh, maybe he's not spawning it subsequently. Let's see. Yeah, he's not spawning it after he dies. And I think that has to do because we actually... yeah, I think I know what that is. It's because on our weapon ID, let's see where we're using that. Start load character. We never use the load weapon after we pass this. So we should probably have a bool force create weapon. So if create weapon, load weapon all weapon ID. If not, then just do nothing. We'll be doing the same thing. Then on our match manager, we have the init, we have the create controller actual. This creates all of them, so we could just say bool create weapon, then just pass it here. For this one we can just say false, but for when sending to create the player, create controller for player, here we should be passing true. Or we could control that through the RPC. Which in our case, this will be controlled from here. Again, this will be done as an RPC later. So I know from my deathmatch that I do want them to start with a weapon, so let's make that to true. Save. Let's see. Oh yeah, we're missing one. That's what this is. This is the debug start, so let's say false. Or let's say true actually. It's the debug start, doesn't matter. And I think we're pretty much covered everything we want for this part as well. Of course, there's a lot to play. For example, we should be adding kill feeds, we should be adding score points and stuff like that. Okay, there he goes. And there he goes again with a new weapon. And voila, that's how it works. So that's it for this part. We now have a framework to actually create rules for the entire game. And for us, so basically we can have different match rules and so on. So any type of game you want, any type of match you want, we can do it really easily with this. So that's it for this part. As always, you know what to do. Like, subscribe, and if you like to see more stuff, more videos, more series, more of everything, then of course consider supporting my Patreon so we can keep making all of these nice things we're making. I'll see you next time.